Hello random people of the internet, my name is Joe and welcome to my random life. And today I'm going to talk about a topic that I found very interesting to read and research, as well as something that has affected me for nearly all my life. And that of course is dyslexia, if you haven't figured that from the title. The first thing is first, I like everyone to understand what dyslexia is. It has nothing to do with intelligence or laziness. It is a matter of fact a very common learning disability that many people have, whether it's processing the reading and writing and even at times the spoken language. People who have dyslexia are no more or less intelligent than a person that hasn't got dyslexia, and they can understand as much as complex ideas as the next person. In general cases in dyslexia, the person just needs a little bit extra time than someone else to actually manage to work through or process the information that's been given to them. So this video I'm hoping will give some understanding to people who don't understand dyslexia and how it affects people who have dyslexia in certain ways. So hopefully you will take your time to watch this video out because it's going to be quite long. A lot of people who have dyslexia don't realise that there are loads of people out there who have dyslexia, and I was really astounded to find such a big list of famous people who have dyslexia. And I have 4 people here that I know from growing up watching them on TV or seeing them in the cinema or even listening to the music on the radio, and I'm really surprised to see at least 2 people on this list. I only have 4, but that's 4 of so many. So the first person I have on my list is Steven Spielberg. I was like looking at this going like, what? I did not know this. How did I not know this? Because I would have rubbed this in every person's face who called me stupid. The second person on my list, of course, is Whoopi Goldberg, who is probably the biggest spokeswoman out there for people with dyslexia and learning disabilities. And she's amazing because I actually really love her in nearly every film she's done. The third person on my list was a bit of a surprise to me because I only found out today when I was researching this, is Keira Knightley. I've often used Keira Knightley as my married in Marry Snog and Avoid. And Keira Knightley is always been the one that I want to marry. The other person on this list is usually my avoidance song marry or avoid, and that is Cher, because I know Cher from years ago being on the radio, and I used to take the piss out of her music the whole time. Now that is just a few of the famous people that are on the list who are down as dyslexia. Now dyslexia and dyspraxia are in around one areas of disabilities, but I'm not 100% sure if Steven Spielberg was dyslexic or dyspraxic, but yeah, he was on the list and I have the list linked down below. It's also stated that dyslexic people are generally very creative, and it's very unclear whether or not a dyslexic person is this creative because they're forced to think outside the box a little bit more than someone who isn't with has dyslexia, because when you're dyslexic you have to figure out different ways around other things. But of course this may be down to the fact that our brains are just wired a little bit differently than someone who's not dyslexic. How common is dyslexia? Dyslexia is extremely common. It affects at least 2 to 3 people per class. And now that's all depending on size of the class, but that's the estimated that they give on the research that I looked at, that 2 to 3 people per class may have some form of dyslexia. But dyslexia also has different effects such as ADHD, ADD and dyspraxia and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to go into that kind of detail. Many times I've asked myself, why am I dyslexic? Why am I the only one that's dyslexic? I answered very quickly by the specialist that assessed me when I was 13, and Turn told me it was hereditary, meaning that someone in my family was also dyslexic, meaning that someone along my line in my family was also going through this disability. So I had a look at my family, and through the years I realised I had an uncle, and I knew I had an uncle who couldn't read or write at all and just about managed to write his name, and I also had a cousin who had bit of a disability too in the learning curve as well. So I had it not only on my mother's side of the family, but I also had it on my father's side of the family. So I do know if and when I do have children, to know the signs to look out for, as well as my nephews when they are at that age. Brain deformity. Now I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrong, but my first initial was, what, are you calling me stupid? And that's not the case at all. Many people with dyslexia have an above average intelligence, but the brain may work differently than the person who doesn't have dyslexia. In other words, dyslexic people are different And why be normal when you can be different? Because, like, you know, be normal is boring. There is a third one there to do with brain activity, but I'm not 100% sure of what this one actually entails, and it sounds very, very scientific, and I really don't want to go in scientifically into something like this, because it just... Being dyslexic, it can actually have effects on you throughout your life, on your daily life, especially when you're in school. So this generally goes down to your social skills. You can sometimes feel a little bit insecure about you and a little bit inferior to someone else in your class because they're able to recite their ABCs so flawlessly and you struggle with your ABCs, or they're able to read the whole Harry Potter book where you're sitting there struggling to read the first chapter of the Harry Potter book. They're able to pronounce Hermione when you're calling her Hermione. They're able to say Dursley when you're saying Dursley. It's different things, and you just realise that it can cause a bit of bullying as well, and it can affect you socially. Listening comprehension is another thing that has a massive effect on it as well. Dyslexic people, did you know, are actually very, very good listeners? That's because we care. But however, we're not very good in noisy areas because we struggle to ignore background noise, so just have to move a little bit closer. Go on, I won't bite much. It can also affect the memory because it takes you so long to read something that you're actually forgetting what you've read just previously to it, so it means that recalling that information is extremely hard. And this can also affect you in school from point A to point C, so primary school, secondary school and college. Dyslexia can also affect navigation. Yes, you're right, knowing the left to the right and knowing the phrase lefty, loosey, righty, tighty. And I just really love that phrase, and I hope to God I haven't screwed that one up. You're probably wondering, how the hell do you know you're dyslexic? Well, you don't really know you're dyslexic because it comes naturally to you. But someone else may already spot the signs of dyslexia, which I will have a link to below. Again, if you're worried that you are dyslexic and you're struggling but you haven't told anyone you're dyslexic, talk to your teachers, talk to your fellow classmates, talk to your friends, tell them that you're dyslexic, tell them that you have issues like this. Friends are probably the best option for you, especially when you're in school and you're in college, because when you're struggling they will be there to pick you up, to help you, to make sure that you understand the work. And personally for me, when I was in college, if I didn't have my friends who did that, I would have been in such a bad place. Also, if you're in secondary school, speak to your teacher, speak to your career guidance counsellor and see if they can refer you to a specialist in a contestant. It is very, very expensive, but generally when you're in school it's covered by a school grant or something like that as well. Now I am going to discuss or to give a list of some of the signs of a secondary school student who suffering from dyslexia. So the first one on the list, and you have to excuse me because I am reading this now and my battery light is flashing at me and I'm freaking out here, so I'm trying to rush through as quickly as possible. The first thing on the list is struggling with reading out loud. Personally, I do agree with this. This is very, very difficult, especially when you're struggling and stuttering and stammering over words. This used to happen to me a lot when I was in school, and I used to get a lot of jeering over it, and it was just a living nightmare, and I hate having to read. This one is very, very common in primary school and in secondary school. A dyslexic person is generally not going to read the same level as someone of their own age. So for me personally, when I was assessed when I was 13 or 12, I was 12, sorry. When I was 12, I was told my reading age was at an 8-year-old. So when I should be reading books in the preteen section, I still had to read books in the 8 to 12-year-olds. But that wasn't a bad thing because I still like to do that now anyway. Another one that for dyslexic people is, and this one I don't really agree with, is actually having trouble understanding jokes. I don't know anything about this. I never had an issue with jokes at all myself. Another one has difficulty organising and time management. This is generally something you learn over time, and it does take time for you to learn this, and it can be no matter what you do. I mean, organising yourself and managing your time, it's basically something you just have to get yourself into routine, and we have timetables in secondary school, so we have to manage our time through that way, which helps. But when you're on your own, it's up to yourself to do it. Another thing that people suffer with when there's dyslexia is summarising content, and this is very, very difficult to do, especially when you're dyslexic, because you can't decipher what's important and what's not important. For a long while I was the person who used to highlight everything back for maybe one sentence, so that's just something I did, but yeah. Another thing that can affect someone with dyslexia in secondary school is difficulty learning a second language or another language. So for argument's sake, in Ireland we have English and Irish all the way through from primary school to secondary school, but then in secondary school we're thrown into having to study French, German or Spanish. Now not all schools do languages, but generally you would have another language, so you'd have 3 languages and it'd be quite difficult. Personally for me, I didn't have any issues learning languages. I was a D student in English, I was a D student in French, and I was a C to a B student in Irish. I was better at Irish than I was at English and French, which makes no sense because English was my favourite subject in school. Hey, guess what? I'm dyslexic and my favourite subject in school was English. What? Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the tips and hints that I've found to help me when I was in school, and if you're still in school and you're dyslexic and you need something to help you out, the first thing I will say to you is observe your surroundings. When I was writing an essay, drawing it out on paper and letting it build through drawings really worked. And this goes back to the point of creativity. I was able to draw out my scenes, my characters, what they were doing, what they were going to do, and then I used to write around them. If you're in your junior cert or even cert year and you're doing your English, sometimes in essays you get the and then it was bang. So you get the beginning and the end, either or, I'm not sure, I can't remember. I used to beeline for them because it gives you the starting point or the end point to the essay and you have to build around that, and they're really good and fantastic ways of getting into writing. If you do like English and you are dyslexic and you do like to read, take inspiration from what you're reading to do your essays, do your writing. If you're dyslexic and you feel that you don't know where to start with reading, if you're a fellow, why do you want, I don't want to be seen in a bookstore, books, blah. Comics, read them. There's plenty of them there. Go online, you can find comics online for free and use them as your ground and get your interest, build up your reading skill. It's going to take time, but it's benefit, it's worth it. If you want to get into reading, there's no harm in going to your local bookstore and going into the kids section and picking up a kid's book and saying, this sounds interesting, and reading the book. I personally picked this book up. This is targeted towards girls. It's a fairy tale and it was fantastic. My battery is still flashing at me. I'm at 16 minutes. So I'm going to say adios amigo. I hope this was beneficial and I hope that you have an idea of dyslexia and so on and so forth. And if you have any questions at all, comment below. Definitely click on those links I have in the description because they're definitely worth to read for anyone who wants to understand more about dyslexia. And on that note, I shall see you all on the flip side.